Good afternoon. I'm Molly Young from the Miami University Alumni Association. Today, as part of the Miami Alumni Association's webinar series and in partnership with the CEC Women's Advisory Committee, today we present Leveraging Innovative Technology to Solve National Security Needs. Joining us for today are alumnae Amanda Ryerse, class of 18, and Mary Ellen Giffels, class of 85. And the two of them are going to be with us for a really probably important conversation about national security innovation and safety in this ever increasingly digital and interconnected, not so private world. So welcome to the two of you. Glad to have you here with us. I think you're going to have some important information for us to take in today. So just a reminder to the viewing audience, you too can interact and ask a question by using the Ask a Question button under your video. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Amanda and Mary Ellen to get us started. So welcome to the two of you. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Molly. I think you saved a few years off of my age because I actually graduated in 82, but I appreciate
82.
That's thank you for that. I graduated as a young high schooler, not really. So really happy to be here today. Really happy to work with you, Amanda. Amanda and I are both on the Women's Advisory Committee for the College of Engineering and Computing, which is where we first met. So I'll tell a little bit about myself, and then I would love to go into depth with you, Amanda. So I graduated in 82 from Miami. I worked in my career in banking, pretty much on the technology side or the business side of technology. I used my same skills that I learned in my Miami classes throughout my career. And I left banking in 2021, and I'm now a leadership and executive coach for teams and facilitation work. That's what I do now as part of my second chapter career. So I live in the Chicago area, and Amanda is my new friend who lives in Panama, not Panama City, Panama, the country. So Amanda, why don't you tell us a little about yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Amanda. I guess importantly, graduated from Miami University in 2018 with a degree in electrical engineering and a minor in poli-sci. So I've always had an interest in how the world works, and I have always had an interest in problem solving. And so that's kind of been a theme throughout my whole life. And so kind of growing up, and then in college, and then post-college, as I worked as a cyber threat intelligence analyst, and then also as a project engineer for a startup strategic investor. So, and then that's kind of even pervasive outside of my work, and so just kind of in general.
And so I know,
excited to be here.
Thanks, Amanda. I know from our previous conversations that you grew up in Northern Virginia, more in the DC area, and that's not the most common place to source a student to Miami University in Oxford, Ohio. So what drew you to Miami?
So I grew up in the Northern Virginia area, and I'd never heard of Miami University, obviously being 9 hours away. And my grandparents actually have a farm not too far from Oxford, Ohio, and I was out there one time, and they were like, "Have you heard of this school called Miami?" And I was like, "No, you mean the one in Florida?" And and they're like, "No, the one that's right down the road." And I went on a chance and I visited, and it was a Make It Miami Day, and it was awesome. And I loved it. I fell in love with the red brick. It's just absolutely stunning. I think it was downpouring, and I still thought it was like the most beautiful campus I had ever been to. And and so I went and loved it, and then fell in love with also Miami's approach to education. And it was really awesome to kind of see they encouraged, obviously I could get an engineering degree, but I could also take Miami planned classes and take classes outside my major and learn about other things. And so that's kind of what drew me to Miami from Northern Virginia.
So when did you know you wanted to be an engineer?
I don't know. I think it was probably in high school, maybe. I think I just really liked math. And I also really liked science, which I feel like is pretty typical. But growing up, I remember when I was younger, I used to want to be an inventor. I just thought it was really cool to make gadgets, and I just thought it was really interesting. And so I kind of took physics in high school and really liked it, really liked math. And my parents really encouraged me. They were like, hey, maybe you should check out engineering. Maybe you should check it out and see if you like it. And I kind of really didn't know what I wanted to do. So engineering sounded great. I liked math, I liked science. And I was like, well, I might as well explore and see what it could offer. So.
And you chose electrical engineering. That's one of the hardest of the engineering. So what made you choose that?
I don't know. Honestly, I think I chose electrical engineering because in that physics class that kind of piqued my interest in engineering. We did something with circuits and I thought it was really cool. And I was like, oh, this is really interesting. Like this, you can turn on a light, you can do really everything is powered with circuits. And so especially in the modern age. And so I just kind of was like, this seems interesting. I'll try it. I knew I didn't want to do anything mechanical. That wasn't really my speed. And I didn't really know any of the other engineering. I didn't like chemistry. So it was kind of process of elimination. I was like, no, thank you. Chemical engineering sounds not up my alley. And so I kind of just process of elimination and it seemed interesting. And so I figured if I didn't like it, I could always switch, and it seemed to like it enough to stick it out and get a degree. So.
And electrical is a field that's known to not have as many women in it. So how was that going through your classes where you were definitely in the minority much of the time?
Yeah, I didn't think it was hard. So electrical engineering is just a hard curriculum in general. And then you kind of throw on being, I think I was one of two in my graduating class. So it was often me and another woman in my classes, or just me. And I think I had one female professor, and I think that female professor taught one of my classes out of, however many you take over the course of 4 years. And I was, it's hard, right? Because everyone else, it was looking like, they were understanding the topic, they were getting it. I was, looking over my shoulder going, wait a second, like, I'm not really understanding this. I'm not really sure. And then you're not seeing other people struggle. You're not seeing, I didn't see any other women really. And so I'm looking over and being like, do I actually, really belong? And I think imposter syndrome really sets in, and you're like, okay, do I actually belong? Can I actually do it? Am I even qualified? Like, maybe I should have picked a different major, And I think for me, also going from excelling at high school to then college is a whole different ballpark. And I think it's very normal to struggle and be just to be like, wait, I don't actually understand how this works. And I'm, not doing as well as I did in high school. And then, all of those emotions and all of those are swirling around. And then you look around and you don't really see anyone who looks like you, and so it was like very isolating, and just, really challenging because it adds to the tough curriculum, because there's an element of like isolation and feeling like you don't actually belong. And so then that makes studying and, all of that harder. So I definitely think it was a big challenge, and it's not something that's gone away. I think electrical engineering still gets pretty low numbers at Miami, and across the board, not just Miami, but, across universities. So it's definitely a challenging curriculum. And then also, just one that doesn't have a ton of women.
So how did you get through it? Well, how did you cross those thresholds of challenges?
Yeah, a lot of different ways. I think I lived on campus with other engineers. So my roommate was not an electrical engineer, but she was a chemical engineer. And I think that was helpful, having some other women engineers, but also within like classes, because I do think that studying in groups and like there's a lot of support that comes from that. And I think it's really important to find some community, especially just for support, encouragement, pass your classes and learn. And so I found a group, and by found, I mean barged my way in, and it was all guys, and it was fine. I had no issues with that. I just wanted to pass the classes. And I remember I approached one of them, and I am a very outgoing personality. And I said, "Hi, I heard you're really good at differential equations, and I'm really struggling. Do you think you could help me? Do you think you could, I'm not really understanding. Do you think you could help me? Do you think you could, do you guys study? Could I join your study group?" And kind of had to create that space, right? We talk about like, if there's not a seat at the table, you have to make your seat, like bring up a chair. And so that's kind of what I did, is I barged my way, and they were really kind, and they stuck. I think that was sophomore year of college, and we, through the thick of it, stayed together and really just kind of practiced. So I would say for anyone who's really struggling with that, I think even if they're not like you, like they're not a minority like you, find a group, because I think community is really important. And especially when you're going through really tough curriculum and just the whole emotional process of college, I think it's really important to find solidarity and find community, because like you do belong there. And I think it's super important to combat like that imposter syndrome and those negative and intrusive thoughts of you do belong there. So that's what I would say.
And what else I hear in what you're saying is not only you belong, but know that those negative thoughts and those negative feelings are kind of normal, and you can overcome them, right? You don't have to live by them and then hold yourself back.
Yeah. And I didn't realize that other people felt the same way, right? And that goes back to like when you're isolated, it's easy to think that you don't belong, and that your struggles you're the only one. And it's just not true. Like I then learned other people were also struggling with differential equations, or we were, trying to figure out how to build circuits or program FPGA boards. Like they're all, you're learning how to do it, and you're not alone in that. And I think Miami has done a good job of continuing to grow that community. Like I know there's like Society of Women Engineers, there's the NESD, there's a ton of groups. But even if you're not in a part of an official group, which I would encourage students to join, but you are find, even if it's two people, right? And you have a 3-person study group, or even if you have a 2-person study group, like building that community and that support, I think is so crucial to surviving, isolation, but also tough curriculums.
Good advice, really good advice. So I'm going to switch a little bit into, you mentioned the Miami plan, and I know that your minor was in poli-sci, which is not a normal combination that I've heard of, people, electrical engineering and political science. Tell me about why you chose that and how you found that to be a part of you.
Yeah, I definitely got a lot of people who were like, really? Like political science? But I grew up in the DC area, right? You are around politics, but you're also around foreign affairs. And every Saturday morning, my dad and I, since I was young, would read the newspaper together, eat breakfast together, and we'd read the newspaper, Washington Post. And I started off with like the comics because, I was 10, and, I'm reading the comics section. I'm like, oh, cool. And then eventually it, transformed into the whole page, the front page, the business section. And so I think for me, it kind of piqued my interest in the world and what's going on and current affairs, and how does, one thing affect another? Like, if the US's behavior in this part of the world, how does that affect this? Or how does this affect technology? And so I think that kind of has always been with me. And then when I got to Miami, I realized that I really wanted to like just take other classes. I love to learn, I love to read, and I wanted to learn more about, the world and kind of pique that interest. And so luckily I had some great professors in the engineering department who encouraged it. And then I also had the poli-sci department over at Miami was like, we will take you. We will gladly have you come take some classes. And the reason I got the minor was because in order for me to take the classes, I had to have it declared as a minor. But I got to take, some really interesting classes. I got to take politics of the Middle East, where we role played, different countries and got to see like, okay, if Saudi Arabia did this, what would Tunisia do? And just like such fascinating ones. It took some international political economy. And I think I got to take these classes that again shifted my perspective, and I got to learn and look at solutions differently. And I think that has been huge, is just to see like the solutions today are so multifaceted. They require, understanding psychology and politics and the environment and culture and all of these different things. And I think it's very easy as an engineer to get in your bubble and to be like, okay, well, this technical solution should work because this is the best technical solution. Well, that's true. It may work, but let's take that technical solution and let's apply it to, a country that has very different politics, very different culture. Their approach to anything like the environment or whatever, their approach to building things is different. That doesn't necessarily mean it's bad, but we have to look at all of those factors in order to make sure that we know the best solution. So I feel like that's always been with me, is just kind of learning about how the world works and then leveraging that. And I think the poli-sci minor allowed me to learn more about the world and take interesting classes. That was really what I wanted to do. So, yeah.
So that's a really good segue into your career. So let's talk about how you transitioned from being a student to becoming a professional. So did you use career services? Was that part of your journey? Because I think career fair is coming up later this week, if I'm not mistaken, and a lot of students are probably polishing up how they're going to present themselves to career fair.
Yeah, no, I definitely did. I think I went to career fair, I think all 4 years, and it was terrifying. Even for someone who is a extreme extrovert, I was absolutely just like, it's overwhelming, right? There's like 300, 400 companies who come and you're trying to pitch yourself. You're like, I've never had a job. I would like to get one. It's super overwhelming, but it's definitely, everyone should do it. Go, put yourself out there, cross, what I would say is the chicken line, where you're really scared to do something and you got to cross it and just trust that it's going to work out. And so I did. I leveraged, the interviewing. I did some practice mock interviews. I had my resume reviewed. And I think I definitely leveraged the career services aspect, because it's free. You can go get practice speaking, because even for someone who is extremely extroverted, how to present yourself to companies, how to talk about something you did that maybe you're like, I'm not sure how this fits. Well, these people are experts and they can really help you. And so that was kind of I use career services a lot.
So I know I've been a recruiter at career fair, and it is overwhelming, and it's loud and just sort of stunning. And there's a lot of companies. How did you decide which companies to even approach?
I think one of my favorite expressions is, how do you eat an elephant? And you eat it like one bite at a time, right? And I think if you look at career fair and you're a college student and you're saying, okay, how am I going to tackle this? Like, there's so many companies, I don't even know where to start. And so for me, I think I broke it down. And like my freshman year, I don't think I broke it down great. I think I just was like, okay, I think this is great. And I just started. But I think if you break it down, you say, okay, these are the list of companies that are coming. Okay, great. Now I know where to get that. When is it? Figuring out like, when is career fair? Can I go? For how long can I go? And then you go and you say, okay, I'm interested in maybe learning more about biomedical companies, or I'm interested more in maybe companies that focus on, building engines or space. And so you kind of break it down, or what am I actually interested in? And then you kind of go from there and you say, okay, what companies do that? Are there 4 aerospace companies that are coming? And maybe okay, I like this company. I think they do some cool work. Are they hiring? Like, what are they looking for? What roles are they doing? And you start to kind of look and see, okay, how can I tailor, my resume to that? But also, how can I pitch myself, right? Because career fair, you go, you approach a company, and then you're trying to talk and sell yourself out of 70,000 other candidates, and She's like, okay, well, and everyone's wearing their black suit and, you know, they're dressed super professional. So how do you stand out? And so kind of practicing all of that. And then my trick was I would pick a company I had absolutely no interest in. I was like, okay, I have no idea. I think freshman or sophomore year, I think I picked a wine company. Like they were coming for business students. They were not coming for engineering students, but I just thought, okay, well, maybe I'll check them out. And so I went and I pitched myself. They were the first company I went to, and it went awfully. It was so bad. It was abysmal. I lost what I was going to say. I froze. I was like, wait, oh my goodness, wait, that's not what I wanted to talk about. You know, I also have these skills. It was horrendous. But it was good. That was my first one. I didn't care about the company, and you kind of get one over and then the nerves kind of start to go away. And so I would each year pick 2 companies I didn't like, and I would go and I'd pitch myself to them, knowing that if it went well, great. If it didn't matter. And so I think that was
first. When you first went to the career fair, you'd find those companies and do your practice rounds.
Because that was the bite of the elephant that I could eat. I was like, okay, this is the bite I'm going to take. Okay, if it sucks, it sucks, but I'm going to do it. And then now I feel more comfortable. So then when I approached the company that I was actually really interested in, I didn't sound, didn't have my voice crack. I didn't, freeze and, freak out. So, so that's kind of my approach for career fair.
So did you get your first internship through career fair?
My first internship came after junior year of college. And I did not get that. The one I chose did not get through career fair. I actually leveraged my network and tried to find a job through there. None of the internships. I think I had 3 offers. One of them I got from the career fair, and it was great, and I was really excited to take it, and then found out I didn't meet their GPA requirements because I thought, yeah, I definitely will meet it, and then I didn't, and that's okay. And so that was kind of heartbreaking, as a college, and you're like, wait, am I gonna find another job? Like, what am I gonna do? And you will. So like, if you don't find an internship or a job out of career fair, like, it's okay. It doesn't mean the world is ending. It just means that you have to pivot and you have to figure out, okay, what's next, and how can I leverage my network I have. And I think when you're in college, you're like, I don't have a network. I'm friends with other 18-year-olds. Like, how do you actually leverage, like, what network? Like, I'm over here like, okay, Susie Q over here is also 18 and is looking for a job. I don't know if, she's going to be able to help me find one. And I think in college, what helped me was I reached out to professors. I had some really great professors, and they knew people. They'd been out in the world, or they had been in, a long time where they had graduated students who were doing stuff. And so I leveraged. So if you're in college, I would recommend, reaching out to your professors and saying, hey, I'm interested in this. I'm not really sure where to start. Do you know anyone in this field? Not even to like get a job, right? Just to learn more about that field, or to go, have a conversation and say, okay, like, what does this actually look like? We talk about aerospace, right? And if you're like, okay, I really want a job in aerospace, but you don't actually know anything about aerospace, you actually may hate it. So I think it's really important to leverage, I keep saying leverage your network, but like, that network can be your professors, it can be your parents. So for me, my internship came through a family friend. I reached out to my parents, and I reached out to their friends and my neighbors, and I said, hey, I'm looking for an internship. I would like to get some real world experience. Do you know anyone who is hiring? Do you know any internships? Like, even if they were like, I think I heard someone say this, I was like, great. Can you send me someone who works there so I could talk to them? Can you send me the link? And so just kind of using what I had and like the resources that were at my disposal. And if, I think like I had a lot of professors do great, wonderful things for me. And so I try to now pay it forward. And so, if people reach out and they're like, hey, I'm interested in this. And I'm like, okay, I don't know anyone in this I don't know anyone at that company, but I'll reach out and see if, hey, maybe someone else does. And I think that's what a lot of people did for me. And you'd be surprised, like people want to help. People are like, hey, they really do. And so I had a family friend, and that's how I got my first internship at Booz Allen Hamilton in the DC area.
So tell me more about that Booz Allen internship that you had.
Yeah. So Booz Allen Hamilton is a defense and intelligence contractor. They're a big name in the DC area. So I'd always had heard of them. There's Northern Virginia is known for their defense contractors and the defense industrial base that is there. And so I kind of heard of them, and I really had no idea. When I mean no idea what I wanted to do, absolutely none. I was like, I don't know, I like engineering. I could do something else. Maybe I'll do something else. I think I looked at just a whole gamut of different opportunities. I was just looking for a job and looking for some sort of real world experience. So I ended up finding out about this cyber internship, which cyber and electrical engineering are very different. There's some overlap, but I would say it's very minuscule. Electrical engineering kind of focuses a lot more on the hardware, and cyber is a lot more of the network. How does it work? Some coding, some software, all of that. And so I was like, this sounds interesting. Oh, I don't know. And so I reached out, and I had no idea what I was doing, but the internship was a rotational program within their small cyber team. And so I got to sit with everyone on the team and learn about all the different types of pen testing. I got to learn about malware analysis. I got to learn about incident response. What else? Yeah, red teaming, blue, all of it, all of the big fun cyber buzzwords. They all had a team. And so I got to sit with them and really get in the weeds to learn, one, how does a network work? How do we defend against attacks? What is a cyber, attack? What is a cyber incident? Anything like that. How do we deal with this? But also, how do you behave in a professional environment? All of it. So I really got kind of thrown into the deep end, and it was awesome. And I absolutely loved it. And so I really enjoyed my time at Booz.
So at the end of your internship, did you get a full-time offer for after you graduate senior year?
I did. And I was really excited and really surprised. Not because, I didn't think I did a great job, but just I was like, oh, wow. Okay, this is real. I know. I was like, this is real. And yeah, so I got this, the offer, and I really wasn't sure if I wanted to take it. I liked what I had done. But I was like, maybe I should start looking and see, maybe I should actually do something else. Maybe this is actually not what I wanted to do. And so I did some more research, but I realized I was like, I liked it. Why not stick with, if it was good and it's a job, it's real, why not stick with it? And so I leveraged, I keep saying leveraged. Yeah, so I kind of just took advantage of that, and I was like, okay, I think I'm going to accept the offer. And I accepted the offer pretty early into my senior year. I think it was September, which is not necessarily recommended, but it worked for me. So
did you go to career fair that year and just check out other options?
I did. I think I had accepted the offer, but I was like, well, I might as well, and it's always good practice. I don't think I put in as much effort, but I think part of me was still okay, I should go, because what if this offer doesn't work out? What if it falls through and I'll have nothing? And yeah, and so I went, and same thing, went to companies I knew I didn't care about, and it's like, okay, all right. And
you had a process by that point.
Yeah.
So tell us, what did you do at Booz?
Yeah, so full time, I pivoted over into one part of the overall cyber team. So internally at Booz, they have their own whole cyber division, and you're responsible for maintaining the integrity and the safety of all of Booz Allen's networks. And so I was on their cyber threat intelligence team. And so cyber threat intelligence, also CTI, is essentially you're looking at network behavior, you're looking at a computer, and you're saying, okay, this is normal behavior. Okay, this looks fine, great. And then if it doesn't look normal, you're kind of putting the puzzle pieces together to figure out, okay, what went wrong? Was it malicious? Was it not malicious? Was it intentional? All of these different things. And so you're saying, okay, you get to, as the CTI team, you kind of get to be the final pieces, you get to really put the puzzle pieces together, because you're going, you're saying, okay, malware team, you guys are the experts in malware. What did the malware do? Did it, beacon out to a malicious IP address? Did it, download software that we're like, okay, wait, we don't want keyloggers, whatever. Okay, then we're saying, okay, what's actually happening. We're going in, we're saying, okay, can we see who clicked the link? If someone clicked a link, from a phishing email, who clicked the link? What do they work on? Is it sensitive? Were they targeted? And so you're really getting to pull these pieces together and say, okay, build the story of what's happening. What was the problem? What's happening? But then on top of that, and this is where my fun poli-sci background comes in, is you then get to say, wow, okay, I've seen this behavior before. This looks familiar. It reminds me of a time I saw, Iran do that. And so let me back up a little bit. In cyber, a lot of times the big four nation state actors, so actors that have the funding of their government, are the US, or not the US, North Korea, Iran, China, and Russia. And so those are the ones, when you're looking at being targeted as a US company, those are the big four. And so essentially what you're saying is, okay, these four companies, and particularly Booz Allen is a known defense contractor, so they're going to get targeted by those big four. Regardless, because of their affiliation with the government, their affiliation with government contracts, and just the nature of different work that they do. So, okay, knowing all of that, you're saying, okay, this behavior looks oddly familiar to maybe an attack I saw a few years ago, or this malware is known to be Iranian, so maybe we should look into that. Oh, wait a second, this person works on something that is aerospace, or this person is working on something that's finance related, and Iran, we know, is really interested in that. And so what you're doing is you're building out these profiles for these actors, and you're saying, hey, how can we leverage that and build those puzzle pieces? So then we're applying kind of what's going on in the world, which does affect technical behavior, and saying, okay, how can we better prepare and provide better solutions to our internal people? So kind of in a nutshell.
Sounds like detective work. I think I've watched a detective show that does similar types of things.
Yeah, you really are. You're doing it digitally. So you're looking at the digital behavior and saying, okay, let's build the puzzle pieces and figure out what happened.
So were you on the CTI team the whole time you were at Booz?
Yeah. When I accepted my full-time offer, it was for that team. And so on that team for 3 years, I think. By the time I left, Booz Allen. Mm-hmm.
And what made you decide to leave?
I think a combination of different factors, but I think the biggest one was, this is a very niche area of cyber, and I was like, what else is out there? I kind of wanted a new challenge. I wanted to learn. I love to learn. I'm trying to stay abreast of different technology issues, whatever, and I was just like, okay, next challenge. And I think I was really burnt out. I left I want to say a month into the COVID pandemic, and maybe a year into the COVID pandemic. And so I just wanted a new challenge. And so I started, full disclosure, had a breakdown and was like, what am I doing with my life? And really freaked out. And then had a great mentor, and he was kind of like, okay, it's okay. What's next? What do you want to do? What are you interested in? And I went, I have no idea. I absolutely have no idea. They were like, okay. And so I had, he had pointed me in the direction of, some VC stuff, venture capital. I was looking at, biomedical companies. I was kind of looking all over the place. Did I really want to stay in cyber? Did I want to stay in a technical field? And kind of really broke it down into what I wanted to do. and then ended up finding the company I worked for most recently, which is called InQtel, and found them through a mentor of mine. He kind of pointed me in their direction, and I went and checked them out and realized that I was like, oh, this could be another interesting stepping stone for what I wanted to do.
And what does InQtel do?
That's a great question. So yeah, I had never heard of them. I was like, InQtel, what are you talking about? And they are a really interesting unicorn, and they sit at the intersection of technology, of business, and of national security. And so their whole purpose, right, is they're a strategic investor. And really, that's just fancy words for a VC firm, and they invest in startups, so in small companies that are growing, they're babies, and they need more funds. And so what they do is they invest in these startups, and they say, hey, we really like your product. We think it needs to grow. So we're going to give you some money to do that. But how they're different than other VC firms is they're really looking at impact. So because they are the investor for the United States intelligence community, so they are investing on behalf of the U.S. intelligence community, they are saying, hey, we really like this technology. We think it will be really impactful for our mission partners to use out in the field or to use to keep the United States safe. We want to make sure that this technology gets, keeps growing, and we want to make sure that it either gets shaped the way that we need it, that also fits your commercial purposes. So that's why they're, the whole purpose of them investing. And they came about because I think the U.S. government realized that they were no longer, starting in the 2000s, the center of innovation. I think if you look at the 50s, 60s, right, the U.S. government, right, because of World War I, World War II, the moon, trying to get to the moon, right, driving that innovative technology. And I think we started to see that shift with Silicon Valley, and U.S. government and a few people in there recognized, and hey, maybe we're not necessarily the center anymore. And so, stood up this whole VC firm. And so they're completely separate. They're not, tied to the government. They invest on behalf, but it is their private sector, their 501(c)(3). And so they're really looking for what technology is going to be impactful. Will it also be profitable? But how can we leverage this to keep the United States safe? And it's I speak so highly of it. It's a awesome place. It's a great place to work.
And what did you do there?
It was awesome. I had a great job. And so I like to say the official title, I think, was project engineer, but I like to say product engineer. And so I was in charge of 15 plus different portfolio companies, so startups, and I handled their whole cyber portfolio. And I got to guide these companies in building these products. That's very basic layman's terms, but through the different moving pieces, going back and forth. And so essentially, I'll give an example. I'll use AirPods. So let's say this did not come out of InQtel. Apple clearly made AirPods, but if I were saying, hey, a startup, they built these really cool Bluetooth headsets that, are fit to your ear, and they're really great. And we're like, oh, wow, our government partners have been talking about headsets a lot. They really need some headsets. Oh, that's great. Okay, so let's look at, do we think this startup will be profitable? Do we think that their technology will be impactful? We're like, okay, they're doing really good work. They're not, it seems like they're getting a lot of speed. We want to help them out. So we'll say, hey, we'd love to give you, some money, but we need you to kind of shift and maybe make them noise canceling. Our government partners complain about, lots of it, they work in loud environments. I don't know. And so they're going to say, hey, we need these to be noise canceling. And so for me, right, you're getting to guide them, and they're saying, okay, designed it this way. What do you think? And you're kind of liaising between those startup community who move fast, they break things, they're ready to go. And the government partners, who I'd argue are a little slower to innovate. They, move just a little slower. I mean, by nature, they need to. And so you're saying, okay, does this design work? And everyone's like, yep, great. They go build the product. And then for me, I get to play with the technology. They're like, we've built these great noise canceling headphones. Oh, you need to make sure that they work. And so I get to test them out. We deal with a lot of drones. We get to go fly drones. I get to play, if there's malware analysis tools, I get to, go detonate some malware. Like if it's just, you get to play with the really cool technology, and then you get to then help your government partners build and innovate and continue to install and use the technology. And so for me, it was a great place because I wanted to, learn a little bit more about what other cyber fields were, and that's kind of why I got interested. And then you drink from a fire hose, and it is crazy and chaotic, but it's so much fun because I learned so much about different types of technology, different cyber technology, but also just outside of it, drones, aerospace, rockets, all of the above, like, UAVs, but batteries, all of it. You're learning, and I got to just absorb and just soak it all in, and then you get to play with technology, which I think for someone who wanted to be an inventor growing up, and for someone who was an engineer, I'm like, this is great. Like, okay, I will gladly keep playing with this technology. I'll gladly keep testing it. And I got to work with some fantastic companies. I know In-Q-Tel is known for, Google Earth came out of In-Q-Tel like way in the 2000s. Palantir is a big data company now. But they're really sitting at these forefront because they're saying, hey, we're seeing this issue. Like, I think a big one everyone is concerned about is AI, right? And they're, sitting on these issues. They're investing in AI companies. They're saying, okay, like, where are we, like, how do we see AI shaping cyber? How do we see AI shaping like our government partners' missions? How do we leverage this data without compromising privacy? So we have like companies that are doing that, and I got to work with them, and like you're saying, wow, like these are really interesting companies. They're leveraging these really interesting data because data is huge, right? And like you can use data for everything, but how do you not compromise like a personal, like PII, personal identifiable information, or just like, hey, this is Mary Ellen's data. How do we not, make it clear that this is, Mary Ellen's health data while leveraging, oh, this is really interesting. How do we use this to make better solutions?
So you spoke about In-Q-Tel in the past tense. So Tell me why you left and why you are in Panama, the country, not the city right now.
Yes, so I am in Panama City, Panama. I recently, 2 months ago, actually got married, and my husband is a Foreign Service officer with the Department of State, and which is just a fancy title for diplomat. And so he and I live in Panama, and so I had to leave In-Q-Tel because they are a very smaller company and just weren't set up for remote infrastructure like abroad, because I think working abroad is a very different ballgame than just working a different city in the U.S. And so we left on very good terms. I talk to a lot of the coworkers. I'm always like, oh, what are they up to? What are you doing? But yeah, so I currently live in Panama. Yeah.
And any advice for students that might consider, kind of more of an alternative company, like a company that invests in VCs versus, the standard company that goes to career fair is probably not a VC company.
That's very true. Or they're looking for, finance and marketing and, the business school. But I think that what's interesting is engineers, right, like typically put ourselves in boxes, right? We like clean lines, we like, and if you would have told me in college that I would have gotten to, do cyber threat intelligence, which I had no idea that field even existed, and then got to go work with startups who are innovating on cutting edge technology and doing things I had never thought possible. Like, I think I would have been like, good one, because I liked clean boxes and I liked clean lines and, not messy. And I think engineers typically fall in that. And I would just say, like, get out of that mindset. Like, take classes that will expand your your mindset, take classes, talk to people who are different than you, talk to people who've had different careers. Like startups are a really interesting opportunity because they're always looking for talent. They're always looking for people who are hungry, who are excited. And I would say that would be like the biggest piece of advice. And just like, it's okay to step out of like your career's not linear, like take a step out of it and see where the detour leads. Because maybe you'll find out that actually like the detour is the path, right? And that's okay. And I don't know. And I think I am in a interesting spot right now. So I am currently waiting to start a part-time job at the U.S. Embassy here in Panama. But I'm also trying to figure out what do I want to do next? Like, is there, which is scary and terrifying because you're like, what the heck? What am I doing? But it's also a really cool opportunity to pivot. And I think for me, I am, like I said, interested in how the world works. I'm interested in problem solving. And so for me, I'm like, what are the problems that I care about? Because engineers are problem solvers. If I could like say anything to any engineer team, like pick a problem you're interested in and try and figure out how to solve it. And maybe you're only going to solve one piece of it, but like, how do you eat an elephant, right? I'm going back to that because it's great, right? Take it one bite at a time. And so for me, I'm looking and saying, what are the problems I'm really interested in? And then how do we use technology to aid in our solutions, right? If we're looking at, I think I just read this really interesting article about how blockchain technology has been around for a bit. It was Bitcoin. Everyone was big on the Bitcoin, which is their underlying technology is blockchain, right? But blockchain technology has some really interesting applications. And there are some NGOs and some smaller organizations in Latin America who are using that to track, document, record, and kind of find all of these victims from the brutal dictatorships in Latin America in the 70s and the 80s to kind of see where are these victims that got brutally mass murdered, and so they're using these to find, hey, how do we track this? How do we store this? How do we find these victims and maybe figure out like were their whole families killed? And so I just think that technology is used for everything, right? And we're seeing it used for climate change. We're seeing it used to solve like water and food scarcity stuff. Like people, like engineers can change the world, problem solve because they're problem solvers. So pick a problem and go after it,
You're reminding me of my soapbox around why I believe in the women's advisory committee to the College of Engineering and Computing, because these problems need to be solved by a diversity of brains, right? Mm-hmm. Not just one type of brains, but a diversity of brains. So we come up with the solutions that are more sustainable and holistic for everyone. So this is a good segue for me to sort of check in with Molly to see if we have any questions. I can't see the questions while I'm on camera. So I'm going to check in with Molly to see if she can let us know if there's any questions.
Hi there. Very excellent conversation. I think you touched on a lot of stuff, Amanda, that's really important for students to keep in mind to be successful alumni once they have left, the warm nest that is campus. So thank you for touching on all of that. So we have a couple questions. One comes from Michael. Can you tell us what kind of technologies you think are the greatest threats to national security? And how do you think we might need to prepare ourselves or our infrastructure? Can you elaborate a little? I'm sure that was a loaded question.
No, it's a good question. Okay. Well, I mean, I think a big one, right, is we have troves of data, right? Like just absolutely huge troves of data. And I would say, I think that is a huge problem. Also a great opportunity because how do you use that data, one, without compromising privacy, but also like if you're missing things, like how do you search for and sort data? And so that's a problem that's not just in the national security community. I think that's a huge problem because you're looking at, but it's also in banking, right? How do you keep track and how do you sort and use the data? I would say that's a huge problem. Honestly, so from a cyber hat, think that if we do not get our satellite space is the new, domain. And I think if we don't get our satellites, like cyber, like I said, you could hack a satellite. It's not hard. Well, I don't say it's hard, but I do think that that's something that these technologies, right, when satellites were first launched, like they're not thinking about cyber. And I think that is a lot of times in the back of people's brains. And so that's something I'm really interested in, to see how, will we affect, because satellites, if a satellite goes down, whether by like physical attack or by, a cyber attack, like that's how we do GPS, that's how the internet, like all of it, like Google Earth, Google Maps. And I don't think people realize like how dependent, we are obviously on satellites, but also like anything to do with internet infrastructure, I think is huge. And so I think CISA is kind of widening, what is critical infrastructure and how do we protect that? And CISA, the cyber security infrastructure. I was like, oh, I don't remember what their name is, but they're widening, what it means. And so we're looking at, okay, like water stuff, like dams, all of that, like power, all of those are critical infrastructure. And I think those are up for fair game. I don't know, there's a lot of things that affect national security that I do think are challenging. So I think there's a lot of different problems to tackle.
Right. There are so many layers of national security that, the average American isn't thinking about the water supply and the structure of how water is distributed. And that's just one small tiny corner of,
or even just outdated code. This sounds like there was I think it was 2018, OpenSSL is it's essentially what the internet runs on. It's like blanking, but essentially it's how the internet works, it's how banking services work, everything like the internet runs on this, because it's securing kind of the interactions that computers are having in very like layman's terms. And no one was keeping it's open source, so no one owns the code, but no one was keeping it up. So they had realized there were a ton of flaws and vulnerabilities, which like if those were exploited, right, that's very easy to take down. You take down the banking services, the banking industry, if you take down the internet, I think people would riot. Everything functions on this. And so no one was upkeeping that. And that seems like not totally related, right, to national security, but open source code, I think, is huge, because if you can influence open source code, people pull from that. Like a ton of people, when you're coding, you're going to pull from other code. And so then it becomes this, domino effect of like, okay, then all of this code, I mean, look at SolarWinds a few years ago, right? That was like a line there was like a few lines in code, and every government contractor used that, and every agent, there was a ton of agencies, and they all got compromised. And so it's like stuff like that like we don't think about the domino effect of a lot of like actions and stuff.
Yeah. I think about these banking, information failures. And if there is one thing that's going to make us all eat one another, it's like our money problems and not being able to access our own whatever. These are such, one thing makes so many problems. So, national security is such a large picture to see.
Yeah.
You make an excellent point.
Okay. Of my banking experience, like we would have, just like the bad actors in cyber, they look for those vulnerabilities in the banking world. The fraudsters would, and they would exploit them, and they would broadcast them and be like, it's vulnerable here. All you other bad guys on the black web or whatever it is, go look here. We can get in. And they just perpetuate the problem. So we have to always be ready to step in and anticipate them. And if you don't anticipate them, fix them quickly.
Yes. And I think that people think that like, oh, national security, like in the sense of this sector, like they think that like it's unique, and it is in some elements, but a lot of times it operates very similar to the financial section. It operates very similarly to these. So like finding solutions is not as hard, because the problem is the same, and therefore like the solution can be similar. Like it's not like, the same maybe thing that would work maybe with fraud would probably work maybe with these bad actors. So you're kind of trying to like solve it systematically as well.
That makes good sense. Yeah. Maybe a little more. Yeah. Might make things a little more smooth. Yeah. Okay. We're going to switch gears just a little bit. So you seem terribly busy. You've had an international move. You've recently gotten married. You're like looking to switch gears. You're starting a part-time job. Can you talk a little bit about your like work-life balance and how you're sort of making all of these things work in tandem and not letting them sort of like, cause upheaval? Or
Yeah,
perhaps there is upheaval, but how are you negotiating through?
I don't know. I think I've always, and maybe this will be controversial, I've always hated the term work-life balance, because I think that, not that I don't think that you should have balance in your life, but I think that like, it's not like your personal life stops when you enter like through the work doors, and it's not like your work doesn't, like sometimes you don't take that home. And so I think like the key is like alignment, and so I think it's taking time. Everyone always is like self-care, but truly like self-care of like exercising, like that for me is great. It keeps my mental health. I go to a therapist, and just talking to someone who's trained. And so I think it's just all of that. And then taking time, I think, to rest and let your body, like if you are exhausted, you're not going to be performing at your best self. And so taking time to really rest, and I think for me, those are the big things. And then also just letting your emotions be. Like I have been through life. Got married and moved, and my house is chaotic. It's still unpacking, and that's okay. That's very normal. It's okay. And so kind of letting those be. But I think just like, what are those things that give you rest? What are those things that bring you joy? And do them. So I know Mary Ellen loves to make jewelry, right? And so she does that. And I'm like, and so it's figuring out like, what are those things? I love to read. I'm getting into gardening. And so it's like, what are those things? And then devoting time, even if that means blocking it off like an hour on your calendar, that for me helps me recharge and really feel like grounded. And so figuring out like, what are those things? And then actually taking the time to do it.
A little intentionality, I think, goes a long way.
Absolutely.
Okay, I think I can squeeze in one other question here. What's the best piece or pieces of advice you can give to other young women sort of considering this career in engineering, or, sort of weaving some engineering into yet another career? What are your thoughts and good advice?
Oh man, that's a tough one. I feel like I have like a lot of advice. And I'm like, oh no, which one do I pick? I think that I think if this is tough.
I'm gonna start. I have one that I heard you say,
yeah.
maybe spark some more, because I heard this theme throughout all of your conversation is find what you're interested in, and find problems there that you want to help solve, and use because engineers are trained to be problem solvers. Use your training and problem solving in an application that you care about, like your poli-sci, and then you go to Booz Allen, which is solving problems that with other countries, and then you go to the VC. I mean, finding problems that you want to solve that you're interested in. Anyway, I'm just handing that to you.
No, I feel like that's true. I feel like that would be, and then I think just like we as women are awesome. And I think that like we have been given these great gifts, and I think use them for good and to help others and to solve problems. And I think that it's great and you can do it. And I think it'd be very easy to fall into like, oh, well, this is the safe option. But I would say cross the chicken line, figure out what you're scared to do. And like, okay, maybe you're scared because like, skydiving is scary. But if you're like, hey, I don't know if I want to reach out to this person, cross that chicken line and be like, okay, and trust that like it will work out. And if they are, they're like, not interested, then great, you still did it, and that's okay. And I think the last piece, and I'll leave on this, is a lot of times women forget to negotiate salary. And so I would say negotiate your salary. And I have a whole long story on, I didn't realize that you could negotiate more than just like your actual salary, but compensation, a bonus, vacation days, learning budget. But figure out what's important to you and then prioritize that. And then take that into your negotiation. And, they either come back and they say yes, we'll do that or we'll say no. And then you have the option to decide, yes, please, I'll take this job, or no, thank you. Like, I value myself, or I think I can find something else. And it's okay to say no.
I'm sure we could do a whole series of webinars on the art of negotiation and negotiating salaries and benefits and sort of the various other benefits that you get from your employment. So, that's really good to at least bite into and think, we have every right to negotiate, and it's just finding your comfort level doing so. So there's a little food for thought for me. What can we bring now? And we'll maybe find somebody to talk about that, because I think you make a great point. This has been a delightful conversation. The two of you are super good at this. Thank you so much, Amanda, for sharing your experience, not only on campus, but as you've transitioned into, a real life working person who's not a student anymore, and certainly negotiating all of the various aspects of change in your life. So thank you for being here and for finding some time to be with us today. Mary Ellen, it's wonderful to see you again. I hope we'll see each other again soon. I did want to put out a small plug again for the CC Women's Advisory Committee. Try to look them up, go find them. And then someone else also mentioned in the questions, networking. Networking is tremendously important for both students and I think for alumni who are interested in sort of offering their perspective and experience to students who may be able to use that for their benefit. So if you haven't checked out Miami Alumni Connect, I would suggest that you do that, whether you're a student or an alumni, just with an interest in connecting with students and maybe a little mentorship and relationship building. I know, Amanda, you referenced how important those networks and relationships are. So for anyone interested, there are lots of Miamians out there who are eager to connect with you. So please, by all means, see if you can find us.
You can find us on LinkedIn too. LinkedIn,
yes, and you can find the advisory committee on LinkedIn. Thank you, Mary Ellen. All right. Well, my friends, thank you for being with me. Just a reminder for our audience, if you're not watching now, why would you get this reminder? But you can see all of our webinars archived at alumlc.org/MiamiOH. You can see everything we've done. So thank you all for watching. Love and honor to you both. Me. All right. Have a great day. Take care of yourself.
Bye-bye.